I'm Dan Gottlieb. Thanks for listening to Voices in the Family. So, a rabbi, an imam, and a minister walk into a public radio station. No, really, they do. And they did about 20 minutes ago. They did, really. So, I'm sorry there's no punchline yet, but maybe there will be by the end of the show. So, today, seriously, we're going to talk about whose holiday this is anyway. From the commercialization, the feeling socially ostracized, maybe a broader understanding now of one another's faith. Joining me in the conversation are interim Rabbi Richard Hirsh from the Mainline Reform Temple. Richard, welcome.
Thanks for having us here today.
We've also got Imam, I almost called you a rabbi.
That's all right.
Oh, this is going to be fun. We've got Imam Quaiser Abdullah, and Imam is COO of Cuba Institute, and Reverend Steven Lawrence.
Thank you.
Welcome back.
Morning, Dan.
Is administrative assistant to the pastor at White Rock Baptist Church. So let's start with you, Rabbi Hirsh. Hanukkah is one of the more minor holidays and in Judaism. In this country, and I would guess in this country alone maybe, it's become more significant. Why is that? And on a personal level, how do you feel about it?
Well, I think you're right. Hanukkah on the Jewish liturgical calendar is one of the minor religious observances, but in North America, primarily in the United States, in the last century, it's taken on a much larger significance, which is, I think, a convergence of culture and parenting and a reaction to the larger place of Christmas in our community. And the elevation of that holiday is something that sometimes has been decried by some clergy in the Jewish tradition, but I think most of us recognize the adaptive strategy the parents have figured out, who are coming from a Jewish background, that this is actually a very significant holiday that Jewish kids can celebrate, and adults as well, in response to the culture around them, which is so holiday-focused. In terms of personal, my experience growing up and contemporary is that Christmas is very much part of the culture in which we live. And as I've gotten more involved over the last 10 to 20 years in interfaith work, I've come to seek out clergy who are in the Christian tradition to hear from them their sense of what's authentic, what's inspirational, and what the message is of the season, and also to ask them their reaction, because I can't presume to know that for myself authentically, to some of the concerns I assume we're going to discuss today, the commercialization and omnipresence of Christmas on a superficial or cultural or marketing level as well.
Imam. I worked so hard on these names, and
You're doing really well.
And the simplest one. Oh God, it's so hard being old. Okay, take two. Imam Abdullah. What are the ways Muslims experience this time of year? Do you feel alienated or ostracized?
Well, one of the things I try very hard to do is to avoid speaking for the whole body of Muslims, because we are so diverse. So what you'll find is that in the Muslim community, you have the Muslims who, some of them definitely feel ostracized around this time of the year, because for them, they see it as, okay, this is not our holiday. They may interpret scripture as saying that anything that is not of your tradition, that you need to stay away from it. So some of them, especially if they're working in the professional space, they see Christmas trees up or holiday trees. They see holiday lights. They see everything in a public space, and they feel, okay, this does not represent me. So you may find some of them feeling, okay, if this doesn't represent me, then what do I do in this space at this moment? So they do feel ostracized. You have others, because of the diversity of the Muslim community, you have some Muslims who may put up lights. You have some Muslims who may put up trees. You may not find that happening very much in Philadelphia, but if we look around the U.S. as a whole, you see a diverse group of Muslims, some of them who do feel ostracized, and some of them who feel like, well, it's a cultural tradition, so I can be part of it.
So I'm going to ask you a question that I know you can't answer reasonably because of what you said in the beginning. But is there a sense of alienation all year round in the Muslim community?
And since you prefaced it by, I will not be able to answer it reasonably. No, all around, I would say yes, because you have a lot of holidays that you find on the calendar. You have a lot of holidays for which, or you have various holidays for which institutions might be closed. You have holidays for which schools might be closed. None of them represent the Muslim community. None of them identify with the Muslim community. So if we are looking specifically around this idea of holidays, time off, or vacation, any Muslim who wants a religious holiday, they have to put in, if they're working for a private firm or even for the government, they have to put in for a personal vacation day, a personal holiday. So if we're looking at it specifically in that arena, then yes, there is a certain amount of ostracization that takes place.
You celebrate Muhammad's birthday around this time of year. Yes, I think this year it's January 3rd.
Yes, so because the lunar calendar shifts by about 12 days each year. It gets earlier by about 12 days each year. So Muhammad's birthday, the Prophet's birthday, happened like around, so the Prophet's birthday, we're around the time of it for now. But next year, of course, it's going to move up by 12 days. So, and just to respond to that, some Muslims celebrate his birthday and some don't, because some agree as to when his birthday is and some disagree. And then you have the theological difference as to should we celebrate it or should we avoid celebrating it. So you have all of these diverse opinions as to who celebrates it when, so forth and so on.
Yeah, we got that in our tribe too, don't we?
Absolutely.
Richard Hirsh.
Absolutely.
So I read, though, that those who do celebrate it, it's a joyous holiday. And this is in predominantly Muslim countries. It's a celebratory holiday.
Yeah, and particularly for Muslims, right? So the Prophet's birthday would be one of those days that they may celebrate. But specifically, if you're looking at the core Islam or core Muslim tradition, you have basically two holidays that are celebrated. The one that happens at the end of the fast, which is called Eid al-Fitr, and the one that happens around the pilgrimage to Mecca, which is called Eid al-Adha. So you have these two Eid days that are really the holidays, quote unquote, for the Muslim community. Other other countries or other organizations may choose to have Muhammad's birthday, peace be upon him, as a holiday for that particular group or for that particular country, but it may not be established throughout the Muslim world.
Almost like Hanukkah, being a minor holiday here and a major holiday here and minor in other countries. So we gotta talk to the Rev here, Steve. Steve Lawrence.
I'm enjoying listening.
I don't want you to feel left out. When we spoke with you earlier, you said you had a radical idea about the Greek Orthodox calendar. You don't look like a radical kind of guy. But.
Well, my radical idea came out of my frustration with feeling like Christmas has been the holiday hijacked from the Christians. There are so many holiday traditions that are part of culture and tradition that are not part of the Christian story, that sometimes we feel like we have had the rug pulled out from under us. This doesn't feel like our holiday anymore. And my radical suggestion was that we take those parts of this holy day that belong to the Christian story and the carols and the traditions, and we move them to the Orthodox Christmas celebration, which is usually sometimes in January, and then leave on this 25th holiday the things that remain. So I guess that's Santa and that's lights and that's the tree, and have a celebration where Christians can really focus on Jesus and his birth.
Do we know when Jesus was born?
I guess there are a lot of, again, scholars and traditions who have been able to get a date, but really the date that we're using is the date that the church has established as a time of celebration, and that really was in an effort to take advantage of a holiday, solstice, Saturnalia, all of those images and powers, and sort of move them in the direction of the Christian church. So the people were celebrating in any event. Now this gave them a Christian focus for that celebration.
I want to, if you're just tuning into the show, we're pondering whose holiday this is and how to navigate it. We're talking with an interfaith panel, and we'd love to have you join the conversation. Our number is 888-477-9499. Again, that's 888-477-9499. I want to pick up with you, Reverend Lawrence, about what happens to Christians here and how it gets hijacked this time of year. And I want to ask all three of you your feelings about how it gets so commercialized. This year I started seeing Christmas commercials had to be in October, I think, before Halloween. So I'd like to hear all of your reactions to that, how you feel about the commercialization. Well, anybody?
The commercial power of this holiday is awesome. It's daunting, and it does seem to move further and further earlier in the calendar year each year. There's a nice tradition that's going around with some of my colleagues where they tell their families, on your birthday, I'll buy you anything you want, but Christmas is not your birthday. Mm-hmm. So it's an attempt to refocus that day on celebrating Jesus. And there's even there's a book out called Christmas is Not Your Birthday, where the pastor talks about take the amount of money that you're going to spend on your family and spend that equal amount doing something in your community or doing something in the world that is a demonstration of your love and your compassion. So, and that's kind of a way of turning it around. But it's still we're still at the mercy of the power of the orbit of this holiday. It sucks us all in, and it can taint the way that we deal with each other, so that it's a matter of I have to do something for you. If you do something for me, I'll send you a card. You send me a card. It's reciprocal. It's not the same image of love that is I'm going to do for you whether you can do for me or not.
I was thinking when you were saying that, and it sounds beautiful about it's not your birthday. I was thinking, though, that kids will be kids, and I took my nieces, at the time they had to be 4 and 11, with their mother to a homeless shelter. We bought all sorts of kids' gifts, lots of them. And we brought it to the homeless shelter, and the kids opened them, and, they played with the kids. And at the end, I said, so what was that like? And the older one said, it was nice. And then she said, I would rather get gifts myself than do this next year. So, kids are kids. I'd like to hear from the others. Richard Hirsh, what are your feelings about the commercialization?
I was thinking when Reverend Lawrence was speaking that there's probably more than one Christmas in our culture, and it's probably less a question of what's the true meaning of Christmas as to which Christmas is being focused and observed. Mm-hmm. I think there's the economic marketing Christmas from Black Friday or now the day before Thanksgiving through the end of the year, where so many businesses make their financial year in that year, and that's one Christmas. There's a Christmas of the radio stations that turn their music over for 6 weeks to just Christmas songs, and they range from the superficial and the popular to the sacred and the uplifting. So I think that's with every religious holiday in our culture, and it's true about American holidays like Thanksgiving, which is either, potentially a football holiday or a family holiday, and they're not mutually exclusive. There's a tension here that I think we're all speaking to. I was interested when Reverend Lawrence was making his somewhat radical proposal, which I can't speak to with any authenticity, that you were talking about dialing back something from being too large to something more modest. And Hanukkah is the opposite dynamic. It's sort of the dialing up of something that started rather small and has become large. But I think the tension for clergy in particular is meeting our population, the folk population, our congregants, sort of halfway where they are, because they're in that culture of Christmas or Hanukkah, whatever holiday it might be. And having them tune that a little more sharply as opposed to choose this version as opposed to that version is probably more respectful and likely to be more successful.
Apropos of that, let's go to the phones. We've got Huma Ashan on the phone. I hope I pronounced your name correctly.
Yes, you did. Thank you. Thanks for taking my call. So I had a question for the Imam. So we're Muslim Americans, and we don't celebrate Christmas. And our oldest, he's 6, and he's exposed, through commercials, TV, through school. And he's been really upset this past month just because he keeps wanting to celebrate and have Santa Claus come and get some toys and have the trees. And when I talk to a bunch of our friends that don't really celebrate, that aren't Christians, but they actually do celebrate, and they do, even if they're Hindu or Muslim or Jewish, they actually do as well celebrate. So just wanted to get your advice on if you had suggestions on kind of how to approach it, because my fear is that if I start it once just to even do a Christmas tree and a few gifts, that now we'll have to continue it for years to come because we've got 3 kids.
I have to tell you before the Imam answers the question. So he's listening to your question, and he's smiling and he's shaking his head side to side. I'm sorry if I outed you here, but
no, that's perfectly fine. When we answer the question as to what advice and how do we engage our children around this time of the year, I'll take it from a very personal perspective in terms of how I engage my own children at this time. I think one of the things that we try to do in our family is educate them as to what the different traditions are, so that they come up with a very clear identity as to, okay, this is what we do, this is what other faiths do, this is just how they live and practice their own tradition. This is not something that we celebrate, this is something that other people celebrate. One of the things that we found here in North America in particular is that the Eid celebrations, they aren't as big as the Christmas celebrations might be. So children may find that, okay, for Eid, why don't we get the number of gifts that we see happening around Christmas time? For Eid, why don't we get all of these different types of things that we see happening around Christmas time? Now, when it comes to how do you navigate Santa, how do you navigate the tree when they're asking about these things? I'll just tell a quick story about my sister. My sister, she is Roman Catholic, but she comes from the tradition that Santa Claus is a character and he's not real. And she told that to her 4-year-old daughter who went to school, and at school when everyone else was making Santa Claus cards and stuff like that, my niece gets up and says, "I can't do this. Santa Claus isn't real." So on that note, if I'm not mistaken, her teacher told her to just don't say anything more, and she was excluded from the activity, almost ostracized from the activity for the rest of the class. So, in response to you, Huma, when it comes to how do we navigate the Santa Claus, I think being honest with children is one of the most appropriate ways to approach this, because sometimes we try to protect them from being hurt, from being left out, and by not being honest with them, I think that does more damage to them than anything else. So being asked for advice, that is the best thing that I can do from my perspective as a parent and also as a religious person here in Philadelphia.
I also want to add, as a psychologist, about children experiencing hurt or disappointment. It's painful for them. It's painful for you as a parent. And each time a child gets hurt, it helps them. It helps them grow. I remember once my grandson said, Shuag, because he was, protected like most. And when he was about 8 years old, he said to me, "Pop, will you toughen me up?" And I'm thinking, well, life is going to do that for you. We've got to take a break. Shuhad, thank you so much for your call. It was really an important issue. Well, we're talking about whose holiday is this? What does this holiday really mean for all religions and for those who are not religious? We're talking with Quaiser Abdullah, who's the Imam and COO of Quba Institute. Reverend Steve Lawrence is an administrative assistant to the pastor at White Rock Baptist Church. Richard Hirsh is the imam, the interim. Oh, boy. Is the interim associate rabbi at Mainline Reformed Temple. He's a member of the board of the Interfaith Center of Greater Philadelphia. We're going to talk much more about what that center does. And I'm Dan Gottlieb. You're listening to Voices in the Family right here on WHYY-FM.
The Philadelphia Foundation supports WHYY. The foundation offers charitable gift annuities, charitable remainder trusts, and pooled income funds. Talk to your financial advisor about how these income-generating and tax-saving tools can build resources for community organizations. The Philadelphia Foundation, 215-563-6417 or philafound.org, 215-563-6417 or philafound.org.
I'm Dr. Russell Kaufman, president of the Wistar Institute. Wistar proudly supports WHYY and announces the opening of its new 7-story Robert and Penny Fox Tower, designed to accelerate scientific discoveries. Here, Wistar scientists are working together to develop a new drug that targets and attacks the cause of prostate cancer. Learn more about this and other advances at wistar.org. The Wistar Institute, today's discoveries, tomorrow's cures.
We're back on Voices in the Family. We're talking about this holiday, what it means to different religious traditions. I've got 3 clergy here sitting around the table with me, but that doesn't cover all religions by any stretch of the imagination. We've got on the phone with us, we've got Suhag Shukla. Did I get that pronunciation correct?
Yes, you did.
Tell us about what religious faith you're coming from.
So I was born and raised in the United States in a traditional Hindu household in the San Francisco Bay Area.
So tell us about what this holiday experience is for you.
Well, growing up, we had a tree. My dad had a Santa suit that has been passed down to our family, so we're just waiting for someone to be able to fit into it. But it was something that was celebrated with ease, I would say. I think there were probably a number of reasons that were behind that. First was maybe pressure to assimilate. My parents were recent immigrants. They arrived here in the late 60s to pursue their higher education, and in the early 70s, there wasn't a large Indian American community. Second, I think it was just natural for them to want to share the joy of a holiday with the vast majority of their colleagues and their neighbors, in the same way that maybe in India they saw their Christian and Muslim neighbors getting in the spirit of Diwali. When something is celebrated by so many people around you, it's kind of hard not to be drawn into a festive spirit. And then I think the last and probably most important part, which kept, I think, our celebrations not just at a hallmark level of celebrating the holiday with gifts and the Christmas tree and Santa, but even singing Christmas carols that were religious in nature, is the pluralistic nature of Hinduism and ability.
Let me stop you there.
Yeah, sure.
Say that again. Christmas carols that were other religious and pluralistic.
So I think that comfort comes from my parents' understanding of Hindu teachings that the truth is one and the paths are many. So it's this pluralistic ethos that allows us to appreciate the inherent divinity of Jesus. Now, I'm not saying that it was central to our Christmas celebrations, but it wasn't seen as something that was taking away from our being Hindu. And that, I think, also contributed to the comfort of having Christmas celebrated.
Do you live, work, are you friends with a larger Hindu community?
I am. I'm very involved. I'm actually the executive director of a advocacy organization called the Hindu American Foundation. So have the opportunity to work with Hindu communities across the United States.
Is their experience, again, these horrible generalizations, is their experience similar to yours?
I think there's a spectrum. I think as we hit a critical mass as a community, there's something like 2.5 million Hindu Americans in the United States. I think you see kind of a shifting to wanting to celebrate Diwali with the same type of gusto. Diwali is our festival of lights. The Hindu calendar is based on a lunar calendar, so that holiday occurs anywhere between October and November. A side note, in terms of the commercialization of Christmas, when those sales start early in October, it actually has a good benefit for those Hindus who are on the market for Diwali gifts, because we can at least take advantage of the sales. But
as a understanding, compassionate psychologist, I have to say I'm glad you're happy about that.
Although I can see the frustration, because you see the same frustration, say, in India, where you see a commercialization of Diwali in the same way, where the sales are beginning. And I think it's maybe not as delinked with the religious significance of Diwali as it may feel, I think, in the United States with Christmas. That said, I think that I do run across many Hindus who don't celebrate Christmas because it stems from a feeling of not gaining or having the mutual respect of some Christians who, may portray Hinduism as a path of darkness, or don't have this pluralistic view towards other religious traditions, and that kind of places a hindrance, or not just a discomfort, but maybe a matter of self-respect to say, wait a minute, we're not going to necessarily partake in something where we're not necessarily wanted or respected. So I kind of see a broad spectrum in terms of attitudes towards Christmas.
Naturally. Well, I want to thank you so much for your call and your input. It's really important.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks so much. That was Suhag Shukla joining us about the Hindu faith. I forgot to give out the phone number when we came back. It's 888-477-9499. Again, 888-477-9499. Rabbi Hirsh, I saw you taking notes when Shukla was... Yeah.
I was thinking as she was speaking that when you're a minority religious community in a majority culture, as Muslims, Hindus, Jews, just about everyone who's not in the Christian community at this time of the year, including secular people, I was thinking that there seem to be basically three strategies to what we do when looking at holidays of other communities. We can embrace them, and I was saying to Reverend Lawrence during the break that I'd love to hear how we feel when other people adopt religious observances that are owned by a certain community. For example, when Jews have a Christmas tree, what does that look like to people who are Christian? So the idea of embrace other traditions is one strategy. The idea of denying is certainly a strategy that I was familiar with growing up. We don't need it. It's not important. It's not ours. And actually, we have something that's equally good and maybe even better. And I think the current strategy that seems to be so important in our culture, especially as we've become more aware of the multi-faith dimensions of the United States community and its culture, is to understand and appreciate other religious traditions. And we're back to Reverend Lawrence's question. With our own kids in our family, I remember this being the question of how did we introduce Christmas to them as sales in the stores, as trees and Santa Claus, or as understanding what the teachings of the Christian community are around that holiday and how to appreciate that without needing to mimic it.
Christ is seen by Muslims as a sacred man.
Yes.
Does this take something away from honoring Christ, from the vision of Christ?
A very good question. It's interesting that you mentioned that on Friday, our holy day is on Friday, and on Friday I gave the sermon at Cuba, and the title of the sermon is Why Muslims Love Jesus. And I took the opportunity to speak a bit about how, as Muslims, we need to look at Christmas, I'm putting this out in the air, how we need to look at Christmas differently from how we may have looked at it in the past. And one of the things I was advocating was that many times when it comes to for some of us, how we deal with Christmas is exactly what Rabbi Hirsh said. That's not from us. we don't deal with it, keep it away from me. So if someone comes up to me and says, Merry Christmas, what is my response? My response could be, thank you, same to you. Or I could just pretend like I didn't hear anything that was said. And then they say it louder, Merry Christmas. Oh, I still didn't hear you. So those are some of the options that people have. And one of the things I was advocating was, and it comes back to something that Rabbi Hirsh just hinted at. If someone came up to me, and this has happened many times, how would you like me to congratulate you on Eid? What would you like me to say to you? And they would ask me, should I say Happy Eid, Merry Eid? And I'm like, all of the above are fine. All of the above are fine. So one of the things is that when someone comes up to us and says to us, as Muslims, Merry Christmas, our challenge is, how do we maintain respect? How do we maintain that community of faith? How do we acknowledge them as having a valid tradition? And one of the arguments is that you say same to you, season's greetings to you as well. So going back more directly to your question, Dan, in terms of how do we navigate this, these are just some of or how does Jesus factor into this? Yes, when we look at the commercialization of it, for those who accept that this is the time of his birth, and even within the Muslim community, you have that disagreement as to whether or not it is or it is not. Regardless of what it is, we have a significant population of Christians who acknowledge this time as his birth time. And some credibility or some credence needs to be given to that, just simply as brothers in faith, that, this is your holy time, this is your spiritual time. But does the commercialization of it take away something from that, from how we view Jesus? Yes, it does. Right. It definitely does, But how do we respond to that is a very different question, and something that I've been hinting at.
Does the commercialization take something away from how Jesus is viewed?
It becomes the factor to contend with. I guess that's a good way to say it. Because it is such a powerful influence in this holiday. It even moves to the point of trying to identify what are the values, what are the Christian values connected with Christmas? Is it the sentimentality around the tiny baby in the manger and the mother and the father? There's so many parts of the story that have also been hijacked and just made nice. When the story, the birth story, really is the connection to the death story. It's the whole story of Jesus. That's why the birth is so important. It's because of what's going to happen later. And that part gets taken away if this is just the holiday about. And it's not a bad thing. It's a nice thing that if only once a year people look at each other in the eye and say something nice to them. Isn't that a wonderful feeling? But it's not just the wonderful feeling and the gift giving. It is, for Christians, it's remembering who Jesus is and why that's important. And I guess part of what I'm saying is, for many Christians, we feel like we've been moved away from our own holiday. It's the focus isn't on Jesus. The focus is on many other things.
Ergo, switch Christmas.
Well, that was a nice idea for a short story. But I think that we are more a society of learning to live with each other than to separate into separate camps so that we can have our own holidays. Right. Every faith is going to practice what it practices. And in this multifaceted society, we have an opportunity to watch each other as it happens and to ask questions. And when we have friends that share values, even if they are of other faiths, our holidays become a moment when we can say, tell me what this holiday means to you. Tell me what these practices mean to you. That builds community in a very exciting new way, I think.
I hear you talking, and perhaps instead of let's get Christ back in Christmas, let's put love in Christmas and respect in Christmas and generosity, because that's what Jesus was about. So, and that's something all of us have in common. It's not just all religions, it's all humanity. I mean, that's what makes us whole. That's what gives us well-being. Those things, and not the gifts. They give us moments of pleasure, but well-being, it comes from love and gratitude and generosity. So, I wish it could be more than a bumper sticker. It's up to you guys at the Interfaith Council to do that. We've got to take another break. I want to say to all the people on the phone, I promise we will devote the third segment to phone calls. So I apologize for making you wait this long, but these guys are really interesting. My guests today are Imam Quaiser Abdullah, Reverend Steven Lawrence, and Rabbi Richard Hirsh. And they're all active in raising awareness about interfaith cooperation. Well, I'm Dan Gottlieb. This is Voices in the Family, right here on WHYY-FM.
Supporting WHYY, Caring Friends Home Care, a nonprofit Quaker-based organization, provides in-home care. Services include home care aides, meal preparation, dressing, hygiene, light housekeeping, and more. With hourly or live-in care, clients receive services while remaining in their own homes. Clients living in long-term care communities can receive additional support. Details at caringfriendshomecare.org.
I'm Robin Young. We'll review some of the best commercials of 2014, including Anna Kendrick's non-Super Bowl ad for Newcastle.
I was really excited to make a commercial with Newcastle, but then it turns out they don't even have the money or permission to make a commercial. They can't even say the word.
Next time on Here and Now from NPR and WBUR Boston.
This afternoon at 1 on WHYY.
We are back on Voices in the Family. I'm Dan Gottlieb, your host. We're talking about the holiday from different religious perspectives and what the commercialization of it means to all of us, and especially different religious traditions. As promised, we're going to go right to the phone. We've got Debbie on the line from Huntington Valley.
Hi. I was just wondering a couple of things. I wondered if your guest could comment. First of all, I was wondering how they would feel people who are not Christian could sort of have a slightly more unified approach, in that it would be understood in the culture that some people don't celebrate Christmas, and they teach their children that, it's we can't have everything. Christmas is beautiful, but it's something that, we don't celebrate, and we can appreciate it and love it, but, we don't celebrate that, and we have our own traditions, similar to what the rabbi said. And the other thing is, I was wondering if it could be, maybe it really would be better if there was like a more general understanding instead of this vague idea, some people celebrate but they don't really believe. Yeah, I mean, if you're Christian, you have a Christian background, and you don't really believe, but you do celebrate, maybe all parts of the holiday. That's different from a person who's not raised in the tradition and who just does it for fun. There's something kind of disrespectful about that. I mean, you wouldn't really want, I think it would be a little bit offensive if some people, had a bar and bat mitzvah and they're not Jewish, but they did it for the fun. Christmas is, it's got a serious foundation to it. It's not just for fun. It is fun. It's beautiful. But I just wonder if it could be like a little less vague. So
let's ask our clergy to respond to that. And Debbie, thanks so much for your call. So I want to talk first to Reverend Steve Lawrence.
I'm conflicted because I don't want to remove from persons the opportunity to do those things around this time of the year that are part of their tradition. But I am concerned that so much of the tradition is not based in the Christian story. If the Christian story is about God's promise to come and deliver us, and to do it in this very personal way, and come in this very vulnerable form of this little child, if that's the heart of the story, then people talk about Christmas and their expression is about lights and tree and ornaments and gifts, then they're talking about another Christmas. They're not talking about the Christmas that's the Christian Christmas, even though in this culture, because it's a foundational Christian culture, it has become the poster for what the season looks like. Even Santa Claus's picture is it's the Coca-Cola Santa Claus. So this is it's the commercial. The commercial is so powerful. And what I keep saying is that somewhere in all of that mix are these Christian foundational pieces that for many of us are no longer the driving forces of this holiday. We feel like we are as captive to it as other people.
So let me ask you, say I was born Christian, raised Christian, and I don't belong to a church. I don't see it as a religious holiday anymore, but I buy lots of gifts. I got Christmas trees. I've got lights up on my front lawn. I pay higher electric bills. How do you feel about that, about me?
You are Christian, raised Christian, but you don't celebrate Christmas in a Christian way. It's more in a cultural way. Is that what you're saying?
I'm representing a lot of people.
Yeah. I agree with that. I think that it's ironic that on Christmas Day there's probably fewer people in church than there ought to be on the day of the celebration. I know at our own church we do a Christmas celebration on Christmas Day, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock in the morning, give people a time to get up, get the kids to open their gifts, and then put them in some clothes and bring them to church. And we're there for an hour and a half singing carols, hearing a Christmas message, trying to keep that focus. But in the larger society, Christmas isn't about remembering who Jesus is. It's about these other pieces.
Therefore, I want to put you on the spot here.
Yeah.
How do you feel about me?
Well, I feel like I've got a ministry to you. I want to try to talk with you about including in that celebration the part that really is the center, because the part that's being celebrated is it's the cultural Christmas, it's the traditional Christmas, but it's not the Christian focus or the Christian center. It doesn't mean this is a revelation for me. Maybe it's not such a bad thing in terms of if for 1 week people will behave nicely and treat each other well and buy each other gifts. All of those are benefit to the society, but those are not the focus of the Christian message for Christmas. Those are other things.
Quaiser Abdullah.
Yeah, I think I want to I was about to say piggyback, but some of my Muslim listeners might have an issue with me saying that. But I want to piggyback on something that Reverend Steven was speaking about, and even respond to what the caller Debbie said. Even in our own tradition, among Muslims, when it comes to the Eid, you have that Eid has a very specific significance. There are very specific spiritual values that come around it. But then you have Muslims who, it's Eid, I am supposed to buy nice clothes, I am supposed to give gifts, and I will do exactly that because this is what the holiday has come to represent in some cases. So this phenomena of something becoming commercialized or cultural simply because I identify with a broader category of people who identify with that particular institution, it's something I think happens, and I can speak for Muslims. I know it happens in the Muslim tradition. I'm not too sure about the Jewish tradition, but I know it happens in the Muslim tradition, just like it happens for Christians around Christmas time. So this is something that we also navigate.
Richard Hirsh?
I think the question that Debbie's raised about whether people bring to their own faith tradition a faith, the question I think that we're all talking about this afternoon, I think what they bring to those traditions, if they've grown up in them, irrespective of whether they're currently believers, though, is a narrative. Right. And the narrative is primarily family-based and emotional. Mm-hmm. It's not cognitive and philosophical. Mm-hmm. And if they remember, for example, going to Passover Seders with their grandparents or their cousins, and they have really warm and loving memories about that, they may currently be an atheist, but they're probably going to show up at a Passover Seder. Yeah. And I think, as Reverend Lawrence says, part of the opportunity is to amplify the religious message within that. The thing that strikes me as curious in our comments this afternoon, I wouldn't presume to speak, again, to the authenticity of the Christmas story, but one of the anomalies of the American religious experience is the secularization of Christmas, if I can use that term, has made the emotional underpinnings that you addressed in terms of hope, goodwill, faith, available to people who aren't Christian around the Christmas season as Americans. So in a peculiarly ironic way, the secularization of Christmas, with all the negatives that go with that, have kind of opened up the emotional and spiritual possibilities of what the holiday celebrates to people who are not in that tradition, who can then wish each other, a Merry Christmas or whatever it is that we choose to wish each other, even though we're not in that tradition, because we're speaking to the spirit of the season, which overwhelms the culture in sometimes actually a very sweet and good way.
We've got Ben on the line. He's been on the line for almost the whole show on a cell phone. I have to apologize now for what your bill's going to be.
Thank you for taking my call. I really appreciate the panel. I grew up here in West Philly, and I think I've had the opportunity to be at least a wedding or a funeral at every one of these institutions. So thank you all. We're in a practicing Muslim household. I'm an American guy married to a wonderful Bangladeshi woman. We've got a young son who's 3 years old now. In my family, which is Catholic, we all get together for Christmas. It's a huge celebration, 100 people at Grandma's house. And what we struggle with is how do we find a balance for our son around the messaging and helping him understand that we are Muslims, he is Muslim, but this is a wonderful family tradition, and what do people do to really tactically sort that out? I'm a big believer in what Rabbi Hirsh said about understanding and appreciation cross-culturally, and our family is kind of a testament to that. But for a 3.5-year-old, there's no understanding or appreciation, and it's really hard to compete and balance and help them understand. I'd love a view across the panel of how people handle that.
Who's going to tackle? Nobody's talking. You silenced 3 clergy. Let the record show. There's the punchline.
So Ben, I empathize with you because I come from a practicing Catholic background as well. So one of the things that I had to navigate very early on was my mother giving gifts to my children around Christmas time, and the question would be, how do I navigate this? And one of the things that I did was, okay, we won't get it on Christmas Day, we'll get it on the 26th. Or we'll get it closer to the New Year, so we are not getting it on Christmas Day. But then also, my mother, my sister, they cook on this day. So how do we go and spend time with family and still explain to our children that we're doing this for the basis of family? And that's how we have navigated it. That the reason why we are going here, or the reason why we are doing this, is for the sake of families, because we are going there, we are going to eat. When it comes to singing and stuff like that, we step away from it. But we are there just simply as part of the family gathering. This is not what everyone would do. Some people might disagree with that. But from a personal perspective, this is how we navigate it.
I would add something from a psychology perspective. Your 3-year-old doesn't understand anything through words and won't for a long time. He absorbs things. I mean, he's like tofu. He absorbs whatever flavor he's in at the moment. So he absorbs holidays and different holidays. And, when he gets a little older, then you can explain. And maybe you'll know when it's time when he asks questions. Don't tell him before he asks. And so there you go. I hope that's helpful, Ben.
This is Steven, Ben. I'm a real proponent for the conversation, and there may be points of strife in families, maybe points of strife. There's points of strife in families around holidays anyway. And if there's a diversity of religious practices within a family, but we come together for a dinner, if we haven't had any conversation that says, you have cousins that practice this way, they are still your cousins, we love them, this is what they practice. If we haven't had that conversation, then it can turn into that's what they do, this is what we do, and neither the two shall meet. Right. This is an incredible thing about America, that people are in a mixed situation in a way that they aren't anywhere else in the world. So we're running the experiment on how to do this. We may not know what the answers are, but we are definitely in the test tube trying to figure out how we do these holidays and remain family and remain community, rather than let these things make us strident against each other.
Right. I think that's the critical issue, and perhaps when it's time to explain, understand the great similarities here. we're about community. We're about, what we talked about earlier, those things that all humans long for, really. And, to me, I go to synagogue as often as I can, but I'm not about the liturgy. That place has become family to me. I love the people in the pews, and, I think that's what we're aching for as a culture, a sense of connection to the larger culture. I'm going to ask you, Imam, last question. What's your vision for the future for integration 10 years from now?
10 years from now, vision for the future. I think where we are able, it comes back to something that we said on the panel earlier on, where we're able to not feel like acknowledging the existence of a different tradition is a threat to the existence of our own tradition. That I can speak factually, I can speak about the existence of other traditions, of other holidays, of the fact that this is what goes on in society, and not feel as though it's a threat to me by engaging in that conversation or speaking about it.
It's like the Buddha said, all people suffer, all people want happiness. It's just that simple. To bring in yet a fifth perspective. I want to thank all three of you today. It's been a wonderful conversation, and personally, it's been such a treasure being with the three of you. We were with Imam Quaiser Abdullah, Reverend Steven Lawrence, Rabbi Richard Hirsh. Tune in next week for our topic on laughter, something we all might need before the new year. Well, you can follow us at Twitter. We're at Voices in the Fam. Email us at voices@WHYY.org. Check out my webpage at drdangottlieb.com. You'll see a new course I'm teaching. Well, the engineer for today's show's been Kevin Griffin. Elizabeth Perez-Luna is our executive producer of audio content. Mike and Scott is our executive producer. Lindsay Corfell